Okay. Go ahead, Eleanor.
Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this event, Women's Sports, Women's Opportunities in Defense of Female-Only Programs. I'm Eleanor, and I'm a member of Feminists in Struggle, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. Feminists in Struggle is very pleased to be co-hosting this event with Save Women's Sports and to welcome our panelists. I'll introduce our panelists in just a second, but just some housekeeping items first. If you didn't hear Carol, we do have the chat function enabled, so you should be able to use that throughout the discussion. And we also hope to have some time at the end to take some audience questions, so I'll give you some details about how to do that at the end of the event.
Eleanor, somebody's saying louder. I saw one.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe try turning your volume up. I don't know. Okay. Right, so this session's being recorded. Like Carol said, it'll be posted to the Feminist and Struggle YouTube channel after this event. I'll introduce our panelists now. First, we have Beth Stelzer, wife, mother, amateur powerlifter, and founder of Save Women's Sports. Hi, Beth.
Hey. Hi, thanks for having me.
Our second panelist is Dr. Linda Blade, sports performance professional with a doctorate in kinesiology, track and field coach, and president of Athletics Alberta. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Blade. And our final panelist is Menashe, a longtime radical feminist, socialist, lesbian, and founding member of Feminists in Struggle. Though she hated gym in high school, she was inspired by second-wave feminism to believe in the strength and athletic capabilities of women and girls. She is a co-author of the Feminist Amendments to the Equality Act that was adopted by FIST and has the support of LGBT Alliance USA. The Feminist Amendments would preserve female-only programs, including sports programs, under civil rights laws. Hi, Anne.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
as a co-author of the Feminist Amendments, there were a couple of other attorneys in our group that helped with that.
Okay, I think I said that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so our first speaker is Beth Stelzer, so take it away, Beth.
All right, great. I'm gonna hop on and share my screen with everyone here. Okay, here we go. I am going to introduce you. I'm sure many of you are familiar already with the struggle we have of males competing in female sports. A little bit about me. I was a tomboy, like a lot of us in this fight, and a lot of athletes grew up not fitting the box. Here I am with my champion go-kart trophies. I was one of the only girls on the track. Here's a little before and after of me. I found fitness a little later in life. I was born, raised, and reside in small town Minnesota. As she mentioned, I'm a wife, mom, and amateur powerlifter. And through powerlifting, I became an accidental activist, and I'm here with you today. I trained in powerlifting. If you aren't familiar, that is the back squat here, the bench, and that's me and my son there. He's one of my best coaches. And the deadlift. And I trained for 2 to 3 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. It was really intense, and probably just as much time in the kitchen making my meals to get ready for the state women's powerlifting competition. Well, there, come to behold, a male protested because he was not allowed to enter. So if the sound comes through, okay, I'm going to share a bit of what I saw behind the scenes that day of them protesting. They're chanting, "Share the platform." So basically, instead of competing, a bunch of lifters disrupted the event on behalf of this, quote, transgender athlete. So this male has taken things even further and now has a lawsuit against my lifting federation, USA Powerlifting, here in Minnesota. It's crazy. So after this competition, I kind of fell down the rabbit hole, and that's when I discovered how many women are silenced through this. And I just happened to be in a position where I could speak out. I don't have a lot to lose. And so I started SafeWomenSports.com, and we're branching out into like this international coalition now, and we're just gaining, as I speak out, courage speaks to courage, and we're gaining mass, and now we're creating laws even. It's just a great thing. But here we have a list. Oh, sorry about that. Here we have a look at some of the males that we have compiled that have taken away titles from females. There's over 60 that we have listed on the website right now. They range all sports, all ages. So we're often told, oh, it's only 1 or 2 people, what's the big deal? No, it's gaining strength, and more are showing up. And as you'll find with the current rules, we're only going to see more and more of them. We all know there are 2 sexes. There's no changing that. Period. We shouldn't have to go into these differences like muscle mass, skeletal structures. We're women saying no to male bodies in our spaces, and we should keep those spaces sex segregated. We all know that. For national rules here in the US, the National Collegiate Athletic Association requires hormone replacements, but they don't have actual test limits set or any kind of regulations really. The IAAF, the international track, is testosterone limits less than 5, which we all know that testosterone limits do not mitigate the differences between men and women. The Olympics for 2020 has no surgery required and a testosterone limit of less than 10 nanomoles a liter for a year, which these tests are often done, they can be easily manipulated, often self-reported to the lab of choice for the athlete. It's just not right. We know that testosterone limits, like I said before, do not change the body from male to female. And even so, these levels of 5 and 10 are not fair, because a normal woman is about 0 to 3. And even with disorders like polycystic ovarian syndrome, that only goes up to 4 to 6 on a higher level most of the time. These levels are irrelevant. On the high school level, now this is what really gets me, is protecting these young girls. There are 16 states that allow self-ID into female sports. My lovely home state, for example, and we're trying to change that. We just introduced a bill a couple weeks ago, but my son could just ask for a note from me that says that he identifies as a girl and could have access to the bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports teams. Only a note from a parent. Also, locker rooms, accommodations. When we go on sports teams, they're traveling, they're sharing hotel rooms, and these laws make it illegal for a coach to tell these girls that it's actually a male that they have to sleep in a bed with. We are fighting back. 24 states, so we're almost halfway there. We've introduced bills to protect female sports this session alone. It's awesome. And we have a few that have passed their first big hurdles, a few more that are waiting for hearings. I'm headed to South Dakota on Monday to testify. On Tuesday, I'll testify online for Kansas. And there are several federal bills in the House and Senate. It's just a great thing with Biden's order that he signed. It's basically the one thing we can do to fight back is these state bills right now. So I want to make this story hit a little closer to home. For those of you who don't know, this is Selena Sewell. She had to compete against 2 males in track during high school, and those males hold 15 girls' state titles now. Selena is joined with 4 other girls in Connecticut in a lawsuit against the Department of Education with the Alliance Defending Freedom.
Selena first saw...
I want you to just listen to Selena here a second.
Selena first saw Andrea race her freshman year.
I saw that she was so far ahead of everyone else, and I thought to myself that this wasn't right. Something is going on here, and later I found out that that athlete was a transgender female.
Is there a way for transgender athletes to compete?
that would be fair, that you would see as fair?
I think there would be a way. I'm not sure what that would be. I'm only 16, so it shouldn't be up to me to decide.
And that's key to me. It shouldn't rest upon the shoulders of these young girls to fight this. So here is a race with one of the other girls that's in the lawsuit with Selena. Her name is Chelsea, racing against Carrie Miller and Andrea Yearwood. Pretty easy to see who's who in that race. Another athlete example to show you: in college, CC Telfer transitioned from being 200s, even 300s at his best in male track to just a couple seasons later becoming the national women's champion, and also taking awards like Woman of the Event, Woman of the Week. I think Linda could expand more on this, but when you go from male hurdles to female hurdles, the hurdles is significantly shorter. So at a much better advantage to be in the female category. And let's watch CC here. Whew, what more can I say? We do face harassment for speaking out. This is an athlete, a cyclist with a trans painted baseball bat, hashtag smash the system. Another trans athlete here comparing Sharon Davis to a transgender person. I get death threats. It's insane, but you know, nothing's ever really come of it, and I just keep fighting, and the more truth I speak, the less I get. So this is a clip outside of the Supreme Court last October during the Bostock Harris case. There was a rally, and it was basically taken over by rights activists screaming at us, transgender women are women, and to go home, homophobes.
I am an average American citizen telling you it is time to speak the truth. Defending biology is not bigotry. It is not hate speech to defend your rights. If we allow biological males to compete in women's sports, there will be men's sports, there will be co-ed sports, but there will no longer be women's sports.
So this is the point I want to make. If we allow males to compete in women's sports, there will no longer be women's sports. I am just an average person, and I have made a whole lot of change in just a couple of years. Anyone can make a difference. If you want to help us out, you can head to SaveWomenSports.com. We also have SaveWomenSport.com and Australasia branch. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much, Beth. That's a great presentation, and good luck with your testimony, your upcoming testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we'll move to Linda Blade. And I wanted to ask you to begin with to talk a little bit about this statement from the American Civil Liberties Union. The ACLU says that trans athletes do not have an unfair advantage in sports, and that transgender athletes have been able to compete on teams at NCAA member universities consistent with their gender identity with no disruption to women's collegiate sports. What's your professional opinion on these claims?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. My professional opinion is it's BS. And I'll go through a little bit why, but first let me just say that my PhD actually was in physical anthropology area of athlete size, shape, proportion, like the body composition, and sexual dimorphism was absolutely foundational to looking at how, you know, the differences in sport performance. And I spent the last 25 years working with over hundreds of athletes in 17 different sports. So what I can tell you for sure, and it doesn't even matter what age, people say it starts at puberty. There's lots of differences, even pre-puberty. But let me just answer this one question about the ACLU, and then there's some follow-up questions I will also sort of respond to that were given to me in advance. So if you don't mind sharing your screen, Eleanor, I can actually just speak to the ACLU issue first. So I kind of threw this together quickly to answer the question. Basically, it's the ACLU is gaslighting women at this point. As let's go to the next slide. The CC Telfer on this podium. Don't tell me a trans woman or trans identified, I'll call them trans identified males. Don't tell me a trans identified male is not going to win a race. They win them a lot. Anytime they get involved, they're either near the top or at the top. And that's because there is a vast difference between males and females. So to say it doesn't happen in the NCAA is just a lie. And if we go to the next slide, we have also June Eastwood, used to be Jonathan, and then transitioned. And this was the announcement that I responded to in 2019. In August, we found out that this person was going to be running in the women's NCAA cross country and long distance out of Montana. And when I looked up this person's the personal best or top time, it was exactly the same time as the women's world record holder in the 1500 meters from Ethiopia. So my question at the time was, okay, so Judy Eastwood went through a little bit of conversion, whatever, like hormones reducing to, you know, more female levels of some kinds of hormones and reducing male hormones. But I mean, the fact is that going in and starting to run again, those hormones are going to start picking up again just from training. So I was predicting at that point that June Eastwood would probably start out kind of being in the pack and then slowly pull ahead. So let's go to the next slide. So right away, of course, it took no time at all. The Grizzlies, June Eastwood, named Big Sky Athlete of the Week in the women's cross country. And this was like, you know, I guess if you look at the date stamp on that, that's by October. So from August, it only took from August to October for June Eastwood to start pulling away. And of course, in the next slide, so now we have the indoor championships in March 2020, and all of a sudden, conference champion in the mile, indoor mile. So, you know, if we just keep going, what we see here is now a different person who, I think it's Baylor, I forget how, I don't know how we're supposed to pronounce that first name, but now we have somebody who transitioned from female to wanting to compete in the men's competition, a swimmer. This young lady, when she was younger, had been champion in many races, set state championships as a girl in high school, and then all of a sudden, you know, in university wants to transition and maybe was authentically dysphoric, I'm not sure, but all of a sudden goes from championship athlete to ranking 443 in the men's NCAA. So not exactly going from, you know, like CC Telfer was 390th ranked in 2017 to champion. Now this person's going from champion to way down the list. Okay, let's go to the next. So basically that's what I'm saying. No, let's go, yeah. What I'm saying is when a male goes into women's sports, they suddenly become the champion. And when a woman goes into the men's sports, female goes into the men's sports, suddenly the champion drops hugely and hundreds of points down the ranking list. So the next slide. Just in the past 6 months, a gentleman from California, Gabe, forget his last name now, Hygard, Gabe Hygard, did a PhD thesis looking at the current incidence of trans in high schools, and given their aspiration to have the same representation in sport as they are in the population, this is what would happen. And he just did a mathematical experiment with like generating numbers after numbers through a computer in terms of the probability of what would happen if there were that many, even just 2% in the population of high school athletes that were trans and then male, and with the male advantage that we know. And he just crunched the numbers through the track and field data. And he actually shows that the probability of a trans identified male dominating girls sports in high school goes from 80% probability in high jump up to 98% in like the mile. So anywhere from 80 to 100% or top 98% chance that males in women's sport in high school in the USA will be dominating girls sports. So that's a high probability. And I found that study really interesting. Next slide. So I guess what I want to answer the question was, does hormonal therapy actually help to reduce the advantage? And if male bodies are undergoing hormone therapy to reduce their testosterone, does it make any difference? Well, exactly a year ago this month, World Rugby convened a huge review on just brought experts from all over the world and people from the trans community, people from the Save Women's Sports community, and really had everybody in the same room just before COVID lockdown. And they had this grand meeting where they looked at all the data. Dr. Emma Hilton was there with Tommy Lundberg. Lots of people brought the data to the table, and everybody brought their evidence. And the summary that they came up with was that, first of all, it's very clear that males dominate in almost every biomotor ability. Like the first thing you see on this slide is Vo2 Max, which is your ability to process oxygen in the body. So you take air into your lungs, and then the blood takes the oxygen out of that air, that's coming in, and then it distributes it to the tissues. And men have an advantage of, up to 40% more ability to actually utilize oxygen for like in long distance running and cycling. Their speed is up to 15% more than women. Their ability to kick hard is like 20% more. Throwing and weightlifting, I mean, it's a huge amount, a huge percentage better than females. And look at this, like punching. So if you're in boxing or like in a sport where there's a lot of upper body contact like rugby, males can punch 160% harder than females. So in every respect, they found that there was an advantage. Now the question is, does the hormone therapy reduce that advantage? So if you go to the next slide, World Rugby, the dark patches that you see at the end of each of those factors is what the is the drop. So in other words, total body mass. The therapy only causes the total body mass to go down 0.4% of the advantage in, let's say, look at muscle volume or strength. The strength, if you have a strength advantage of 30 to 60% and it only drops like 9%, you still have a massive advantage. So all of these things, the only thing that kind of came down quite a bit was hemoglobin, which is your oxygen carrying capacity in the blood. But because there's greater blood volume in men, and because even the capillaries, like going into the muscles, are more extensive in male bodies, there's so many more parts of the cardiovascular system and the oxygen transport that affect your endurance, that even though the hemoglobin went down almost to female levels, the actual VO2, like the actual oxygen consumption, was still greater in the males. So let's go to the next slide. So what came of the World Rugby massive review and all the data on the table was that females would have a 20 to 30% greater chance of getting injured in the neck in the head and neck. And I think it was on that basis alone, even though all the other advantages were huge, the fact that a girl might get severely injured, a woman, a female athlete might get severely injured or even die with a male on the field in the same, in the same team or on an opposing team. That was, the safety actually always comes first in sports. And even though it doesn't maybe seem like it to the viewing public, you look at the NFL and all the injuries they get, but safety has to be paramount. And so on that basis alone, in October of this past year, like a few months ago, World Rugby just decided that for elite women's rugby, you just absolutely cannot have a male body, no matter how they transition or how they identify. You cannot have a male player on the field for elite, but they knew they would get pushback from the trans activists and even in every country. So they said, well, they gave the dog a bone and said basically, they're not going to impose that decision on individual countries or rugby unions in those countries. But the elite female rugby player has to come from somewhere. So if you reduce, if you don't force that rule throughout the system, it's going to be much harder for some girls to come up through the system. And I mean, pretty soon it'll be the whole rugby team will be males and they'll call themselves women. So I think it's pretty short-sighted of World Rugby to say it's only going to apply to elite level, because it's going to affect the whole system of producing athletes for that level. Anyway, so let's go to the next slide. The bottom line is sex matters. It really does matter. It's almost the only thing that matters in terms of categorization in sport. Next slide. So first of all, let's just conclude that, the ACLU doesn't know what, and it's Case Strangio. It's the only one person in there everybody's afraid of that person, obviously, in that organization, but they don't know what they're talking about. And it's just BS. It's absolute gaslighting what the ACLU says. And we just can't take it seriously. But then the final set of questions that Eleanor and Fist offered to me before the presentation was basically to talk about what are the benefits of sport to women? Like, why is it, why should we fight so hard for female athletes to have their own sport? And there's just so many. And I even got this from, ironically, this list of benefits comes from the Women's Sports Foundation, which in fact, disappointingly, it's the Billie Jean King Foundation, supports trans identified males in female sports, which completely confuses me. But anyway, let's go to the benefits. So the benefits are, just to say a few, girls who play high school sports, they achieve higher grades, they're more likely to graduate, they're less likely to get pregnant, and they join all women in sport of all ages in terms of some of these other benefits, like acquiring self-control, and they're less likely to suffer from depression, and you learn teamwork, you learn to win, you learn to win and lose gracefully. They're less likely to get diseases later in life, like breast cancer and osteoporosis. And I will say one thing, the endocrinologists that I've been listening to have already said that whether it's, when you're undertaking transitioning of youth, like the children and teenagers in the States, and like Abigail Schreier's book on the massive increase in young women who want to escape womanhood. The treatment for that with cross-sex hormones and even just puberty blockers, it does a terrible number on your bone density. So just the bones themselves, like just going through that process, I mean, we're going to have an epidemic of osteoporosis. People who by the time they're 30 or 40, some of these kids are just going to have terrible spinal issues and bone issues of just crumbling bones. It's really scary. But anyway, sports offers the opposite. It offers us strong bodies. And I will say one more thing. I know for myself, if I hadn't been a sports person, I wouldn't be fighting this fight at all. I think sport teaches you to fight to keep, you know, even if you lose, like we're probably going to lose a few rounds here, everybody. Like we really are. With Biden's executive order, we may lose a few rounds, but sport teaches you to just keep fighting and keep trying and never give up until you get the victory that you're looking for. Do everything you can to try to win. And this is what we're doing here. So I would say that, you know, if we just go to the next slide, please. I myself was a beneficiary of Title IX, which is partly why I speak up so much on this issue. I was absolutely had no money, and when I finished high school, I got a chance to full scholarship. Graduated from University of Maryland, almost top of my class. I was one of 3 candidates for the actual top student that year in University of Maryland, and basically, I was so fortunate. I was so fortunate that, you know, I was able to do this, go to university, and sport helped me do that. And, you know, really Title IX for the past 50 years, it's been such a great investment in America. I mean, you know, the return on investment is that there have been these exceptional female leaders in business and government, in politics, every walk of life. I mean, even just the mothers, you know, of girls who, the hockey or the soccer moms, that whole soccer mom phenomenon in the 1990s, that didn't come out of nowhere. That was a lot of the women who were benefiting from Title IX in the 70s and 80s. And, you know, another stat is that some 80% of female executives in Fortune 500 companies report to have been athletes. I mean, it really, really matters to have this experience. And so I, you know, just every time I turn around, like these days, really, really ask the NCAA to please preserve the distinction that Title IX offered for women and girls. And how does that relate to women's liberation and feminism? I mean, it absolutely matters because it allows us, it teaches us to stand on our own 2 feet, to never back down. I look at Beth, I have so much respect for Beth. She's getting so many threats all the time, but she just keeps going. I mean, these are the women. This is what sport teaches us. So, you know, I really appreciate the fact that in the last, I would say 2 years that we've been fighting this fight, especially on Twitter, like the amount of support that we are getting from women who never cared about sports before is really, really cool. I just, to me, that's really heartwarming. And so you know, I'll leave it there, but I just really want to say thank you, and just let's just keep fighting because it's so important.
Okay, wonderful, Linda. That was a great presentation. You set up Anne very nicely because you ended with the legal ramification, and Anne's going to talk us through a bit of the legal environment for women's sports.
Okay, I'm going to defend the need for female-only sports from a slightly different perspective. Of women's sports as a form of affirmative action to maximize our opportunity to advance and develop ourselves in areas from which we as a sex have been previously excluded or underrepresented. And in my opinion, female only means female only, and gender identity should not be permitted to override sex under any circumstances. Everyone in FIST strongly supports women's sports, including me. But I do have a different perspective, and so we like to have democratic discussion within the movement, and so I'm going to share some perspective that I have. It's a little bit different. The history of women's sports is characterized by 2 things, in my opinion. One is discrimination against women and girls, including outright exclusion from being able to participate at all. And secondly, women and girls breaking barriers and making records beyond what anyone had previously imagined possible. If we go into some of the history, before recent decades, women had little or no opportunity to participate in competitive sports in schools or anywhere else. Women did not compete at all in the Olympics until 1900, and after that, there were very few events that were open to women. There was concern over the physical strength and stamina of women, and they were discouraged from participating in quote-unquote masculine and physically intensive sports. And less vigorous versions of sports were created, such as softball instead of baseball. Those of us who grew up in the middle of the last century remember girls' easier push-ups and less demanding sets of rules for sports like basketball. Before 1984, there were no women's marathon category in the Olympics at all. We were considered too dainty and fragile for distance running. In 1928, that's like almost a century ago, women were allowed to run a 100-meter and 800-meter race. A few women collapsed after the 800-meter race because they were pushing themselves really hard. Thereafter, the International Olympic Committee excluded women from racing 800 meters. They thought women could not do that. And that was not until 1960 that was opened up again to women. Women's weightlifting was the stuff of circus freak shows. One of circus strong women, her name was Katie Sanwina, who was 6 feet tall. In 1902, was able to lift 300 pounds and can lift her husband in the air with one hand. Another amazing woman in the 1930s, Ivy Russell, could deadlift over 400 pounds. However, the first sanctioned powerlifting contest for women did not occur until 1977. And women's Olympic weightlifting had to wait until, I think it was approximately 1990. The second wave of feminism changed things around for women in sports as elsewhere quite dramatically, and among other things resulted in the passage of Title IX, which is a great victory for women. The number of college women participating in competitive sports is now over 6 times the rate it was before Title IX passed. Yet I would argue there is still not an equal societal playing field for women and girls. According to the Women's Sports Foundation, girls have 1.3 million fewer opportunities to play high school sports than boys. Girls drop out of sports because of the social stigma and being athletic, and that's often related to the stigma against being a lesbian. And starting in adolescence, they do not get anywhere near the same support as boys do. There's less trained coaches available. There are safety and transportation issues getting to practice. Facilities are not as good as the boys' venues, and they lack positive role models. And that's now. That's even with the Title IX. And young women at universities also face inequities. For example, in 2009, Quinnipiac University cut its women's volleyball team and instead elevated cheerleading to varsity sports status. The women sued and they won. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Oops, somebody's trying to get in here, wait a second. Man, okay, anyway, trying to do 2 things at the same time. Female athletes in schools receive only 29% of the total money spent on athletics and only 39% of the athletic scholarships. For every dollar spent on women's sports, $2.50 are spent on men's sports. And we know women athletes get less money than men, and on it continues. Women are also denied opportunities as coaches and as leaders of professional sports. Only 11% of the coaching staff at the 2018 Olympic Games were women. Women coaches are really important to inspire women and girls and serve as role models in a way that even the best men's coaches cannot. And of course, women athletes are continue to be virtually ignored in the media. Only 3.2% of all sports media coverage is about women, though women count for about 40% of sports in the United States. So there's a continuing lower number of female participation in sports, and this is likely not due to lack of interest, but lack of opportunity. We do not have an equal social playing field for women to develop to our maximum capacity. And I agree about the importance of women's sports. The lack of equal participation in athletics is correlated with less opportunity to pursue higher education, less self-confidence, less success in the workplace. And so under these conditions, having affirmative action in the form of not only preserving, but increasing investment in female-only sports becomes, in my opinion, more imperative, not less. So what are those barriers and expectations that women have broken? Now that women are that sports is partially open to us. It's not equal in terms of opportunity, but partially open. We have defied previous expectations of what women biologically are capable of. Compare, for example, top ranks in running the marathon. In 1921, the top speed for a male runner was 2 hours and 47 minutes. In 1960, that top speed of a male runner had been reduced to 2 hours and 15 minutes. In 2019, that was reduced to 2 hours and 1 minute. Women were not running the marathon. We weren't allowed to. We were considered too weak to do that. It was too dangerous for us, so we didn't get to run. Finally, we started running the marathon. So in 1980, Joyce Smith completed the marathon in 2 hours and 30 minutes, faster than the top male runner in 1921. In 2019, Bridget Koskell completed the marathon in 2 hours and 14 minutes, beating the top male speed in 1960. So how fast would women run in conditions of equality? Women lifting double or more of their body weight has become a regular thing, no longer the preserve of circus acts. Top female lifters, and I have this approximate 127-pound category, that's probably not right, but that they've lifted more than 300 pounds. In 1979, I got her name, can't read it. Jan Todd, a power lifter, lifted the famed Menasche stones weighing over 700 pounds, becoming the first woman to do so. There's a couple of other 100 men that have done it. There's now about 5 women, 5 or 6 women that have done what she did, or better. They've bettered her, actually. At that time, in 1979, she was declared the strongest woman in the world. She said in an interview to People magazine, quote, "Strength should be a tribute of all humanity. It is not a gift that belongs solely to the male species." And what's interesting is when they've dug up the remains of people from the Neolithic times, they've found that women's musculature, which they could tell from the remains, was actually bigger, stronger than the top women athletes now. A few years ago, Sherry Wolf published a review in a magazine called the International Socialist Review called "Are Men Really Better Athletes?" And she was providing a review of a book called Playing with the Boys, Why Separate is Not Equal. And that was arguing for integrated sports. Wolf argued that girls were still guided by trainers and social norms away from developing large muscles. And she concluded that while men tend to weigh more and have greater muscle mass, that training and equal opportunity could reduce or eliminate the performance gap, and that women might naturally excel and even become better in endurance sports, such as ultramarathons. She also pointed to women who were excluded from competition after beating men, including, I don't know if I have her name right, Vimy Mitchell, who lost her professional baseball contract after striking out Babe Ruth. Her conclusion was to argue in favor of integrated sports. And what she said was, it is impossible to speculate on the physical achievements and competitiveness women are ultimately capable of, so long as we live in a society where women's strength, speed, and endurance are not valued on par with men. Now, while I agree with that last statement, that in conditions of social inequality, the jury is still out on the significance of the biological differences between the sexes in athletic performance, I come to the opposite conclusion as Sherry Wolf. I believe strongly in women-only programs. I think they help advance us. I support women-only colleges, women-only training programs, and all kinds of areas where we have been excluded and not had an opportunity to develop ourselves to our greatest capacity. Of course, any woman who wishes to compete against males should be free to do so, but women's programs are not about segregation at all. Segregation is the action of a privileged group to restrict opportunity. This is about affirmative action to help an unprivileged group to reach their maximum and true potential. So we need more investment in women's sports, and we need measures to put an end to the remaining discrimination and inequality. I realize we're fighting a defensive battle, but we need to push forward, but we mean more investment. We need real social equality on the ground. And we need affirmative action programs to advance us in every area where we have been excluded or discriminated against, whether it's the STEM fields or any other place we're underrepresented, or for example, politics. 100% of the opportunity should go to females and not males. No exceptions, regardless of gender identity. I don't care about the testosterone. I don't care about anything. I just care about, we want it to be female only. And support for female-only sports should not depend, in my opinion, on the existence of any biological incapacities as compared to males. Wanted to say that the Feminist Amendments takes a very clear stand. The Feminist Amendments to the Equality Act, for those who aren't familiar with it, which is amendments that we wrote to fix the Equality Act to make it protect women as a sex instead of erode those rights. We take a clear stand in defense of female-only sports and female-only programs to provide equal opportunity to our sex. We believe that preserving those programs and expanding and investing more heavily in those programs will reinforce the equality. It won't create inequality, but rather reinforce equality. And so I encourage all women to get involved in supporting the Feminist Amendments, where we're dealing with a lot of issues right now. The Equality Act's about to be introduced into Congress, or it might have been already. It was supposed to be last week. And that is it needs to be amended because as it is, it will harm women's ability to have our own programs that we need for ourselves to develop and have a chance in life. And then we have the executive order, which is also extremely harmful. So encourage people to get involved. If anyone's interested in getting involved in the fight for the Feminist Amendments, we have a coalition called the Coalition for the Feminist Amendments, COFA. We're already involved in lobbying and writing letters to Congress, and we definitely need help. Anyone who wants to get involved can just email info@sexbasedrights.org. And again, I want to say we are committed to doing everything we can do possible to save women's sports.
Okay, so thank you, Anne, and I think that's the last we have of the presentations. I'm not sure exactly how long is this supposed to go, just until 5, so that'd be 2 your time, Anne?
No, we haven't. No, we have more time.
Okay, excellent. So now is a good time to take any audience questions. I see we have a comment already, but before I get to that, I'm just gonna give some guidance on how to do that. So you can just put it in the chat, or if you're all right with your voice and your face being recorded and put on the YouTube channel, you can just raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute yourself. Now, there does seem to be a little bit of confusion about how to raise your hand virtually. So
I don't see how you
there's 2 ways. If you have a newer version of Zoom, you want to go to Reactions, which is at the bottom of your screen, and click Raise Hand. And if you have an older version of Zoom, you want to go to Participants, open the Participants window, and then look at the bottom for the Raise Hand function. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions, any comments? Now is the time.
There was the first comment about how important some of the participants think it is to boycott, to walk off the field until only the trans athletes remain. If we could discuss that some. So what do people think about that? Is there
raise our hand or something?
Yeah.
Raise your hand.
Yes.
Yeah. Sky is saying yes, boycott. Anyone? How about our 2 speakers? Our other 2 speakers and Anne as well.
But my hand.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Beth and Linda? About just refusing.
It just might have to get to that point. To me, it'd be very sad to get to that point, because if you are an athlete, you know how hard these women work to get to these opportunities. And for them to have to give that up is sad. But unfortunately, we're to the point that it might be what it takes to get some attention in the media and to get this really going. Linda, take it away.
Well, can everybody hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay. I think of it in stages, because
Old women.
I feel like when a male athlete wants to come into the women's category, I think of it as like somebody who's a thief, or somebody's trying to get into my house. And so boycotting would be me going to sit out on my lawn and just letting them go into my house.
No, it wouldn't.
Okay,
Wait a
so
minute.
that's fine. That's fine. I totally agree with you. In the long run, it's probably not going to be like that. But if women, okay, let me explain that. Like in my case, I had one shot at the Olympic Games. If in the Olympic trials, I would have to sit out, my whole life is over. Like they will absolutely.
Why?
Can somebody tell Etana to stop interrupting?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Carol, could you please mute?
Yeah, I'm trying. I was trying to find that actually.
I'll say
It's
this-
okay.
Can I say this
we can
one more
ask
time?
the question. Yeah.
Right. So if you want to raise your hand, it depends on the version of Zoom that you have. So if you have a newer version of Zoom, you have to go to the bottom of the screen and click on reactions. If you click on reactions, at the bottom of that little tab, it says raise hand. If you have an older version of Zoom, you have to go to participants, look at the bottom of the participants window, and there should be a blue hand. It's one of those two.
Okay, so let's talk about it, because I agree with Beth that sooner or later, we're probably going to get to the point where the young women themselves are going to be so frustrated with the number of male bodies in their sport, they're just going to sit. They're going to say, we're done with this, because I can't win anyway. In the meantime, the first 2 or 3 who do it are just going to get their whole careers over. I feel like my job, that's why I guess I am so adamant about trying to fight right now, because if people from our generation who already had our turn, and now I'm president of an association of sports, of track and field, if we can fight it at this level, those athletes won't have to pay that price. And then the next thing that we can do as a public is to boycott the products that support the Olympic. If Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble are supporting the IOC, and to the tune, and they definitely are, there are 13 companies that are considered to be IOC partners, and if they have that status, it means they've given at least $100 million to the Olympic Games in the quadrennial, like over the 4-year period of time. So if the IOC is not going to back down from this policy, we can wage a huge battle as women. Look, Procter & Gamble, Tide soap. I mean, there's a lot of products that women buy from Procter & Gamble. I mean, if we really want to be serious about this fight, we can be boycotting the companies as well. So all I'm really saying is I'm not against the women boycotting, like the athletes themselves boycotting. They probably will end up having no choice. In the meantime, there's a lot of things we can be doing before forcing a young woman to end her career. And that's just my, I think it's a time thing. It's not saying that it's not going to be effective if somebody sits out of a race. I mean, it would be, but it'll also be the end of her career. So.
Okay, there's a number of people here with their hands up. Etana and Carol, you want to go ahead? I'm going to unmute you. Yeah, go ahead.
You speak. Oh, I know. Oh, okay. I feel like, if this was happening to men, they'd go on the offensive. And to me, the house is on fire. You get the fuck out of the house, excuse my French. But if all the girls and women refuse to compete, all at once, you got 1 or 2 guys, boys or men, standing on the line. There is no race. There are no hurdles being run. But that because it's not, they're not going to stop it. You want to boycott? Yeah. Now, we don't have time for that. They already have 60 or more people who've taken a bunch of medals and trophies. I saw pictures of women and girls standing online, getting ready for, and you could see the I'm gonna lose in their faces. I don't think you went through that, did you? Because you didn't have men and boys on your line. It's time to do what the men would do, which is to say, I'm out of here. We're not having a race.
Wait, I want to say something. And what the point is, if one athlete says, I'm out of here, of course it does nothing. But if her whole team will do it, it will make news. If the only people standing on the line for that race is the one trans woman, it will make news. It will be a powerful thing. But alone, of course, they're going to just drift away.
It's time to do this. Not wait for consensus from women. We're oh so polite. This is time to take a page from the men book. Because I look for over 71 years, I've learned by watching them to do certain things. Certain times you don't take crap, and they wouldn't here.
But it's strategized.
But we don't have time anymore. This is an emergency. As an old woman now, I want to see young girls and young women have the opportunities that we boomers had.
Okay.
It isn't there. It's time to
I agree that it is crunch time, but you have to understand how difficult it is for these young women to speak up. So for their whole team to agree, or for everyone from the other teams, like at a track meet, everyone on the line to agree to protest, it's a difficult thing. We're trying. We know that there are ways to get there, but we do have many females still fighting for males in female sports.
Well, that's why it would be ever so much more powerful to the women and girls who have skin in the game and have to line up with these fake girls and fake women. And, it's them.
Would the moderator please move this along? There are so many people that want to talk, and it's turning.
Yeah.
Okay.
No yelling, please.
Yeah, we're not going to let people yell like that, Holly. I had you next on the list here to call on you, but please don't yell.
No. That's all right. It's all right. That was Holly.
Go ahead and unmute.
Okay. Has anybody thought of trying to get the spectators to leave the stands when a man walks on the field pretending he's a woman? You don't have to even get all. You can have a protest. You can have however many people. You can plan it in advance because you know these guys are going to be there in some cases. What can anybody do to spectators, right?
Yeah, it's a great idea, Holly. And we were getting to that point, and of course now COVID struck and it's complicated all the events. But it's definitely something that we could invest time into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to move on to any people who have their hands up who have questions, not comments, so questions on the event.
Okay, well, I had written down everybody had their hand up.
Terry and Lauren.
I have Lauren, Terry, Sky, Charlotte, and then iPhone. I don't know who that is. But Lauren, let's go to you.
Okay, thanks. From where I sit, a boycott by the athletes, a boycott only works really for stuff that's for a product or a service that's in demand. And women's sports are not in demand. I mean, it could be argued that the whole point of the whole thing is to drive women out of public life, including sports. I think doing the boycott a boycott by athletes actually gives them a win. Could somebody stop typing? I think it's Holly Hart. Also, I don't agree that that a boycott of that sort by women of women's sports will make the news. As we've learned, our voices are not covered in the news. The media has been captured. So that's not going to be effective.
Big enough.
And I just, I think there on March 8th, there's supposed to be a rally in Washington, D.C. To defend women-only programs and spaces across the board, and to deal with the Equality Act and the Biden executive order. So I think what we need to do is we need to do what the suffragists did, and that is to organize and have big marches and rallies and protests and make ourselves seen and heard. And
I agree with that.
All along.
I totally agree with that. Somebody before was talking about what the men would do, taking a page from the man book, and I don't disagree that that's worth looking at, that those options are worth looking at, but I think that what men would do and what almost anybody except women would do so far is to take to the streets and to threaten, sort of the subliminal level at least, threaten that there might be violence. And I don't know that we need to threaten violence, but I think that
You gotta do something.
I think that classic passive resistance, right? The civil rights stuff works, right? And you do that by putting yourself in the path of the people who are oppressing you, and then you film it.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Let's go next to Terry.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I couldn't agree more with Aitana, by the way. As far as boycotts go, boycotting products is very, very late in the game. That's something you do at very, very end. The beginning is always small. I was marching for rights, gay and lesbian and feminist rights, when there were 600 people in Greenwich Village. Let me tell you something. I was terrified. It was 40 years ago. 600 is nothing in Manhattan. It always starts with a few. That's just the inevitable beginning, and what it does is it gets attention. My question to you, I do have a question, however, it's because I've found that some of the biggest problems I've had in getting heard is that so many of the women in the community where I live, gay and straight and whatever, they call me crazy when I say men are men and women are women. The whole thing has gotten out of hand. My girlfriend Pam says it's gotten out of hand. It's delusional at this point. Right now, I find some of the biggest foes to be the women in my own community. Who do you find to be the biggest foes? Not counting trans-identified males that are clearly on the other side, but people who you would have thought would have been allies. Who is on the other side of those placards? They look like regular 30, 40-year-old women. Who are they?
Okay, anybody?
I'm not sure how they've got to where they are, but I'm very disappointed to see things like the Women's Sports Foundation, like from Billie Jean King, and there are places that Women's Sports Foundation, you would expect it's for women, and they're totally advocating for this.
Billie Jean King? Billie Jean King even?
Yeah. And now
Houston, we have a problem.
Most definitely, and even Martina Navratilova, who kind of, spoke out, took it back a little bit, is speaking out again, but is settling on a middle ground, talking about testosterone limits and whatnot.
Yeah, but can I just today, she agreed with me on Twitter that her middle ground approach is not working right away. The TRAs are actually attacking her for even, unless she goes 100% in favor of them, they're going to attack.
I told you that. They don't want anything less than 100%.
Exactly. I see Barbara Bull's hands up.
Validation.
I know that. Oh yeah, I have everybody on here. Sky, Charlotte, iPhone, Tina, and then Barbara. So Sky, you want to go next?
First off, I'd like to say thank you to all of you women that are working so hard on this. Thank you so much. I've had some success with bringing up the fact that every single male that takes the place on the field of a female is actually excluding women from sports altogether. And so I've been posting up things like stop excluding women from sports, be inclusive, include girls in sports, be inclusive, include gender non-conforming boys in boys sports. In other words, we need to kind of try to change the narrative if possible, because see, they keep saying be inclusive. They're trying to exclude trans people. No, be inclusive, include girls in sports and include gender non-conforming boys in their own boys.
Open category.
See, so it's just that maybe if we can possibly reframe the argument. This isn't about fairness. This is about actually excluding women from women's sports, from sports altogether. And the other thing I'd like to mention is if it's possible to bring out the fact that this isn't just stealing women's sports from the competitors. I no longer watch sports at all, because when I was a child, I learned to box when I was 6. I was extremely good at it. Really good. I beat pretty much anybody. But anyway, there was not any female boxing. And so I didn't get to do it. You know, I could have been really good. I could have been rich.
You could have also had your head hit.
No, trust me. But anyway, that's beside the point. I was very good. And I could have had scholarships and things. I never got to do that. I lived on the street as a teen because life treated me badly. So the bottom line is that women, this is crucial, not only to the athletes, but to all women. And maybe we need to be, bringing that out also. Oh, and also I wanted to mention, I am recruiting. We are doing a movement called The Ride, a Women's Rebellion. And you can find us at therideofwomensrebellion.weebly.com. I will be riding a 900 Vulcan motorcycle, that one, all across the country. And we're holding rallies in major cities all across the country from coast to coast. We need rally planners to help out and pitch in. We need women like all of you that know what you're doing and know what you're talking about to please step up and speak with us. Because we are taking this to the streets. What we have found is that people don't know what's going on. Social media and the internet only reach so far. So on June 1st, we will start in Orlando, and we will continue to ride motorcycles and whatnot and have poster campaigns. And Bertie Rose just finished a design for our shirt. So anyway, join us, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sky. Let's go to Charlotte next. Charlotte?
Hold on. Yeah, I'm right here, starting my video. I have a comment and then a question. Maybe just one question. The first comment is we can't decide for other people to boycott things. If young women want to boycott, they can boycott and they should think about it. But we cannot tell them that that is what they need to do. All we can do is, if they choose that, is to offer them support to help them through that. And so we should think about, I think, if people have suggestions for ways for coming up with ways of supporting women who boycott these things. The question I want to ask is, I know that we all sort of marvel at how quickly this has happened. And my sense of that it's happened as quickly is because there's a lot of money behind it. I don't know that that anybody particularly believes in this ideology, but people are getting paid to do things. And in many cases, I think transgender activists and these organizations that are well funded are doing things like writing school policies. I've run into that myself. The language that these schools are using in my state is language that comes from a policy that's clearly written by a transgender rights organization. Has anybody thought about looking into these funding issues. And also for, I know that, I forget, I'm sorry who it is, but the woman who runs Save Women's Sports, who's on here today. I know that Selena Sewell is suing, but with the help of the ADF is suing for her for having to compete against males. Is there any thought given to any kind of strategy to give more bandwidth to the Selena Sewell case, or to come up with a way to reach out to these young women and offer impact litigation on their behalf?
Anne, you want to speak to that? We know that, we certainly know that there's billionaire money behind the whole transgender movement. There's a number of prominent billionaires, and the Stryker, the Pritzker, Fortune, a number of people who are funding this. That's why it's had such a meteoric rise. And, you know, it's very important that we keep exposing that. But Anne, do you want to speak to the legal question?
What was the legal question again?
Charlotte? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I got it. I'll do it. Has anybody thought about funding impact litigation, working out ways to bring impact litigation from a feminist perspective on behalf of these sportswomen, like the ADF has done with the Selena Sewell case? Because everything that's being litigated in the public arena is being litigated by right-wing organizations, and I just can't help but think that in the long run, that's not going to do us any favors.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to say that, I mean, there is legal strategies, but I think legal strategies are the most effective when they're tied into a movement. And when we think about what women had to do to get the vote, it took 100 years, but we did get it. We have to do the same sort of thing. We have to rebuild an actual women's movement that can start raising things from our perspective and trying to you know, we're in a defensive battle, and I recognize that, but I think it's important to recognize that we need to do more than just the defensive battle. We have to have a vision. We have to talk about the inequality that's still structurally in society, and we have to talk about the importance of women-only sports, women-only programs of all kinds to help us advance. So I think we have to build a movement, and we need to start being in the streets again.
I don't know if Beth or Linda have anything to say about that. I know, I think when Charlotte asked her question, I think she addressed it to Save Women's Sports.
Well, I have one quick thing to say. I have a quick thing to say, because as an athlete, or a former athlete and current coach, my instinct is to compete. And what we had in 1922 to 1934, we had a women's Olympics, and we ran it ourselves. And we were talked into joining the Olympic movement in the men, and it was a bit of a, they kind of tricked the women at the time, because they said, okay, we'll allow you into the Olympic Games with the men in track and field, for example. But then all of a sudden, as soon as we accepted that, then they reduced the numbers of events that we were allowed to compete in. So the only other way we could do this is we start a women's Olympics or a women's world championship event where we have money, instead of spending all the money like on you know, boycotts and lobbying and marches. Like, why don't we just put it in a big pool and say we're going to give women better prize money than what they currently get now, but when you come to our event, it's only female athletes. So for a while there'll be women in both systems. But if we keep offering more prize money than what the normal women get in the normal, like, male-female environment, then more and more women will be looking forward to coming to our events and getting better money and better prizes. And then we can actually gatekeep the way we want. The problem has been that we're just relying on men's sport system and all of the ways that they run sport, and we're always like feeling like we're guests at the men's events.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the issue would be the resources. That's the
but
the handicap that women have.
it's always what it is. It's always what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying it's another way to fight. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying another way to fight, a positive way to fight, is to actually have a competitive model where we do something better for women than what they're normally getting. And then they wouldn't be boycotting at all. They'd just be coming over to our side.
Yeah, there are multiple ways we can fight this. Let's go to the next question from iPhone. I don't know who that is, what your name is. She had her hand up. Are you still there?
Actually,
this is Meredith Remigino. I had logged in first and forgot to put my name, so it was just saying iPhone.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
All right. Thank you, Meredith. We'll go on.
Unless there was someone else under iPhone. I think that was me.
Was there someone else? I thought there was.
No, it's Meredith.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead,
good.
Meredith.
Thanks, Meredith.
Okay.
I
didn't want to be.
No, Carol.
Okay.
This is Meredith. Yeah.
Hi,
she was
hi.
like iPhone initially, so it's her turn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You had another question. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Yeah.
I'm sorry, Meredith.
Yeah.
We didn't have you already. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. No worries. And I know some of you or know some of your names and on this call and directly know some of you, some of us here. So thanks for doing this, everyone. A couple of things I just wanted to say on the whole boycott or not issue, et cetera. For one thing, it's not right to be asking high school kids to be bearing such a burden, even of a boycott. Really, if anybody were to be doing that, it's the professional athletes. It's Allison Felix should walk off the line. It's Emily Sisson, distance runner. It's Emma Coburn. It's Veronica Campbell-Brown. It's the professional athletes who should be doing that. But the other way, but I agree, however, with Linda, I understand as an athlete and coach, I was never at the Olympic level, but been involved in track and field for 38 years at all these different, in different roles. I understand that to ask someone to walk off the line is quite an undertaking. I mean, in Mexico City, they didn't walk off the line. They stood on the podium with their fists raised, right?
And they still
you know what I'm saying?
trash.
So, but I'm not saying it couldn't, but I think what I'm trying to say is that the quote boycott really needs to be more from the professional athletes out there, professional women athletes who need to stand up and say, not necessarily even walk off the line, but they need to stand up and say, no, my event, no, my governing body, no, this is not okay. But as we can all imagine, the reason they don't, for one thing, and a big thing, is they will lose their sponsorships. Nike is hook, line, and sinker into this. Under Armour, they're all into it. So these athletes can't stand up because they will literally lose their jobs, as, by the way, I did. I was hired this fall as an assistant coach of a women's cross-country team at a liberal arts, very high level not women's university, very high level liberal arts university here in the Northeast. And when someone saw that I had testified in New Hampshire on the sort of Save Women's Sports type of a bill that was in New Hampshire, I had testified like 9 months prior at a proper public hearing, gave proper oral and written testimony. They brought that to the attention of the university, and the university terminated my position because someone they said was uncomfortable with something they saw about me on the internet. And it was that testimony. So this is, as people can't afford to lose their livelihoods and jobs. And that's what the professional athletes are. However, they are in the best position to stand up and speak up. And it's really wrong that they have left the burden of this on high school girls and their families. Grassroots groups like yours here, or different groups that are trying, given that we've been abandoned by the big money groups, by the Women's Sports Foundation, by the National Women's Law Center. It's not so easy to say, oh, we should just boycott, just walk off the line. not so easy to say that to high school kids, and really not right to put that burden on them, for sure. And I think, as I said, I don't think the professional athletes need to be walking off the line. They just need to stand up and speak up, but they're afraid for their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, very legitimate fear in this climate these days.
Yeah.
Tina, let's go to you.
Okay, I've been going back and forth over whether to speak, but is there any, no, let me back up. Having an alternative event, maybe not every single event in a large thing, but one event where people are not just boycotting, but they're going to something else, seems like a positive idea. When I've seen boycotts work in union campaigns, it was because they were supporting something else, a boycott supporting a strike, a larger boycott of a company because they did something. I guess a more specific question right this second is, there's three things: the puberty blockers, the reaction that's provoking about young girls in particular, women in sports, and TIMS, trans-identified men in women's spaces that are either prisons or domestic violence shelters, are the 3 or 4 places where there's a beginning of a public reaction. In women in sports, I'm wondering if is there a way, because what we need is a massive public campaign that can support the women and girls in sports, so they have something that they're connected to. Is there any professional women's sports teams? I'm thinking of those women basketball players who have come out in support of women-only sports.
Okay, sorry, we'll get back to that in just a second, Tina, but Beth has to go. So before she goes, I just want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for taking their time and for your expertise, and also for your work on saving women's spaces and defending women's spaces. Thank you so much to all of our panelists.
I just want to apologize that I have to dip out a little bit early. Thank you all, and you can contact me at info@savewomensports.com if you have more questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. Bye-bye.
I'm still here. I'm going to stay here. I want to hear everything.
Good. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, sorry about that, Tina. We'll go back to your question then.
Yeah, if I can just say something, I think a good defense is an offense, and that the reality that I was trying to describe was that we are so disadvantaged. We are still discriminated against. We still don't have equal opportunities everywhere, including in sports. And so we got to turn it around about to show that women are being oppressed, that we are still oppressed, and we need things for us ourselves. Because every single thing, whether it's scholarships, women are getting into Spelman University, taking the positions of Black women. Trans-identified males are getting into Spelman University. They're getting into battered women's shelters, so they no longer have a safe place to go. I mean, it's all over the place. And so we have to start saying, we are oppressed, we are disadvantaged, we are being discriminated against, we are not getting equal opportunity, and this is what we need for equal opportunity. And we got to turn it around, because they keep saying it's unfair, we're being excluded. We got to say, no, we need this in order to be able to participate in every way in modern life. And we have been kept down and kept out and excluded, and we're the ones that have been excluded. I think that, and that's why I think that connecting this is affirmative action, just like with these other programs that are all being threatened, all of them at the same time, and seeing it as one struggle to preserve women's ability to have our programs that help advance us in society.
Yes, and we can't emphasize enough how important it is to get the Equal Rights Amendment, signed into the Declaration. It was ratified by the 38th state last year, and we're waiting for the Biden administration. We need to put a lot of pressure on them about getting that into the Constitution. and as well as we must either amend or defeat this Equality Act. And, you know, this is part of the whole sports issue is part of a much bigger picture that, you know, we need to be dealing with. So I just wanted to add that to what Ann said. Shall we, Tina, are you finished with your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Barbara was the last one with her hand up, and I'll turn it back over to you, Eleanor. I think we're done with those hands up about that issue, that question. But Barbara, you want to go ahead?
I'm muted. Wait a minute.
There we. Oh, I'm sorry. I just was trying to unmute you, but there we go.
Hello? Hello?
There you go.
Okay, but I can't see myself. I'm going to just try to unmute the.
Oh, okay.
See, I can't. The video, I'm not showing. Oh, well. Okay, well, it's just audio, I guess.
Oh, you can't see the screen?
No, it's like, oh, there it's all.
There you
okay.
go. Go ahead.
I don't see myself, but anyway. What I was thinking is that one of the things is the public is going to see this at some point. For example, in the Olympics, Laurel Hubbard or anybody that gets up there in the Olympics, all of a sudden there's going to be outrage. I really believe that. It's going to happen, but there's going to be so much carnage before that happens. So I do think in the end that there will be trans sports. I do, but I think there will be so many people that will be victims before that happens. So one of the idea I have, I don't know if it would work, but now that the NCAA, you know, and this Biden executive order is going through, once COVID gets over, those events are going to start at high schools and at colleges. So could there be a way that women could find out, you know, when they're going to take place and have a protest, go down there and protest every single one of those locals who live there? That's my idea. And also, I think we should protest CNN and the other mainstream media that will refuse to report on this. That could be an idea, a protest. So do you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So those were just my ideas. I was trying to get it on Twitter, but I couldn't get it on because I don't have a following or anything. So, but just stuff like that. Just get in their face, you know, in those high schools, even though they say it's the rule. I mean, if people see that, it eventually will get in the media. If you raise a storm without anybody having to sacrifice anything, that's a way that you don't have to sacrifice the athletes. And my other question is, I want to know, you know, the Equality Act may not pass, of course, because of the filibuster, where they need 60 votes to pass that. They're acting, the other side is acting like I got a letter from Dianne Feinstein after I wrote to her, and she said, oh, you know, everything, they have a majority in both houses. This is probably a form letter, of course, but, you know, there's a majority and I'm looking forward to passing it. But really, they don't have it. They have the filibuster that Republicans have. So I'm just wondering what's the chance of that? I don't see a chance of that passing right now. So that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to say that there is unfortunately a chance that will pass. And
oh, really?
We can fight it. We absolutely, it's all over the place. The Equality Act, the executive order, state laws that are coming down that are eliminating all women as a concept, as a sex. We're being completely wiped out and unable to organize for ourselves, unable to create programs for ourselves, unable to use language to describe ourselves. It's happening in every state. It's happening in the federal government. And so we really do need to rebuild. And I think we are beginning to rebuild a feminist movement. And that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm sitting up in Canada looking at the states, and I look at it's kind of like a big playing field in front of me, and the Biden executive order if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. When a president issues an executive order, it doesn't actually change the law. He's asking for reinterpretation of what's there. So what he's saying is, as far as I can tell, and what I listened to Karadansky and people explaining this, is that what he's really been saying is, anytime you see in any of the laws where it says sex, so in Title IX, wherever it says you can't discriminate on the basis of sex, instead of sex, that's supposed to mean gender identity. Now, the states are fighting back. We're already seeing these 24 states having bills proposed at the state level to say, no, you're the one breaking the law, not us. So that gives me great hope to sort of say, well, listen, the executive order stands there, but if people on the ground, it's what Barbara's getting at, if people on the ground just say no, how much power does that have in actuality, and especially at the state level? If some of these states now are pushing back, what that tells me is it's going to end up back in the Supreme Court. So my question is, what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, we have a very conservative Supreme Court. Usually that works against us. It might work in our favor at this point. But we do have, I mean, right now, we have lower federal appellate courts deciding that sex and gender identity are the same thing, or that gender identity supersedes sex. And that's what they already are making. There's 2 decisions, appellate decisions, that came down right after Bostock that say that. And so we are fighting an uphill battle. We're going to have to start we have to push it. You have to really do a lot of heavy weightlifting to fight this, because it's happening. It's even happening where I'm applying to get an appointment for a doctor, and I fill out a form in medical care. You think sex might be, relevant, and where they just ask for a vaccination, where they ask you if for your gender identity, are you male, female, non-binary, other? Yeah, right. So, and this is for, I mean, medical care, where it's relevant, really, really relevant.
Really relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's all over the place. There's the movement is to erase sex as a concept and eat it and completely override it through gender identity. And that has horrible implications on every single thing women have achieved and want to achieve, because we need affirmative action. We need women-only programs. We need all those things as part of the struggle to get to achieve real equality. And my point, I think, and I'm sorry if it wasn't completely clear, is that we don't have equality on the ground. That's the thing that needs to be recognized. So we could say, we do not have equality. We do not have equality in women's sports, and they're just going to take it away. We don't have it to begin with. We're better off than we were before Title IX, for sure, hugely better off. But we do not have an equal opportunity for women in sports, in business, in professions, in the trades, in every single arena. We do not have equal opportunity. And that's what the message, we have to start talking about us in those terms, that this is part of a bigger picture. And that is why women's programs are so important.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to what Barbara brought up about the, the filibuster. We know that the filibuster, yes, is applicable. However, whenever there's any kind of financial impact to bills, they can apply for, it takes more work, but they have to go through the budget reconciliation process, which is what is happening as we speak with the COVID relief bill, because the Republicans were blocking that. They weren't willing to cross party lines. So in order to have and I think some Democrats, conservative Democrats, were also not willing to vote for it. So they're going through the budget reconciliation process on that in order to get it passed, which only takes 51 votes. And the Democrats have that now with, you know, Kamala Harris operating as the tie-breaking vote as the president of the Senate. So, so yeah, we're in, it's, you know, we're in a very precarious position with regard to that. So we need to really be fighting for the feminist amendments. This is going to have very far-reaching effects for women, way beyond sports, if that thing passes, because all of the laws that have passed in every area that, you know, that have enabled women to have the rights that we, you know, enjoy, that are still, you know, way less than what males enjoy, has been on the basis of sex. So if they muddy that up horribly, then, you know, we're fighting for our rights on every front and for funding for every single kind of program that that is for women, you know, from domestic violence to rape crisis centers to everything, you know, sports, academic programs, and everything else. So,
yeah, I see that Meg has her hand raised. Do you want to unmute yourself, Meg?
Sure, thank you. I just was hoping to maybe, I wanted some more details about this potentiality that state level policies are kind of setting up, laying the groundwork for a fight at the Supreme Court. And Coach Blade started talking about that.
Yeah.
And I guess asking because it just seems like maybe a little more practical place to focus our energy is at state legislators and senators, just because they're actually people that you can reach and interface with maybe remotely right now versus like trying to organize a nationwide boycott or corporate, you know, come at it through corporations who sponsor this trans agenda. So maybe it's worth discussing like that avenue of activism.
Yeah, I don't think it's either or, but I think that what changes politics on the ground is really creating movements, big movements. That's how we got the ERA off the ground. That's how we won abortion rights. That's how we won suffrage. That's how we won every single thing that we've won. Is basically through those movements, and that, you know, has an impact on a local level, on a state level, and at a national level. But we're dealing with a problem that's national and international in scope, so we have to keep our eye on the prize and focus. And I think that's why focusing on a national level, I think, is most important. But all those other things are complementary and part of the same struggle.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, I live in a quite Democratic area, so it's very dominated by Democrats, and I've found that my state representatives, like my federal representatives, aren't responsive to me at all because they're so secure in their position. Whereas I think my state representatives have been a lot more responsive to me. So I think states, I think are a good target. But like you said, it's a multifaceted approach. But I do want to ask a question. I'm interested about the ERA and how that's going to interact with the Equality Act. So, or at least the executive order, because could the ERA be reinterpreted under the executive order? So it would pretty much change the meaning of
everything else, rewritten everything else.
Yeah, it could be, but at least it says sex, which is important, instead of gender or gender identity or any of those words. So sex is good that it says that, so it's going to help. But by itself, yes, they could do that. They could reinterpret it, as some of those appellate court decisions I mentioned are doing, where sex basically means gender identity. So the ERA says that the Congress is supposed to pass laws to implement it. And so the struggle, it will make it easier for us to have the ERA. There's no question it would make it easier. And the trans activists don't like the way the ERA is worded right So that's a good sign. But it'll be a struggle to get it implemented correctly. And to really, what we have to do is we have to make a clear differentiation between sex and gender or gender identity. We have to say these are not the same things and separate them and talk about being female again in the sex sense, which should be the only sense, but unfortunately it's not even according to sharp medical system. Yeah, I think that's what we have to do. And we have to see it as a bigger picture, and which is the point I was trying to make, is that it's a bigger picture. It's not just sports. Sports are extremely important, but it's all those other things as well. It's whether we have the right to create programs that help advance us, or we don't. That's really the issue. Women-only programs.
All right, so it seems like we don't have any other questions. If we do have any other questions, feel free to say them now, but if not, I think we can wrap it up here.
Yeah, I think.
All right, any final statements from our remaining panelists before we go?
Okay, I don't know, are the question and answers, is this section actually going to be on the recording on the YouTube or no?
Yes, definitely. Actually, there is that initial question. We didn't deal with that one, the international law, or maybe that was, no, that wasn't the initial one. It was later on. Is there any international law or UN declarations on this issue? Someone asked, and I don't remember who it was, but
well, yeah.
Well, the UN declaration. Yeah,
I agree with
that. It's called CEDAW. Most nations have signed on to CEDAW, which is the Convention on Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls.
All forms of discrimination against women.
Yeah, all forms. That's what it is. So that one, all of our countries have signed that, and it really does define it as biological sex. That, you know, whether it's being in a prison or like. I don't understand how our countries, like in Canada as well, I don't know how our governments are going to try to get around the fact that they've signed this convention, and yet all of these new laws they're trying to put into place are contravening it, and terribly so.
Yeah, I just want to jump in with one thing. The U.S. never ratified CEDAW, but Jimmy Carter did sign it. So
Okay,
we're
so you didn't
obligated
ratify.
not to oppose that whole statement by the UN. So even though we aren't formally really proactively
well, in Canada we did ratify it, and that didn't make any difference to Justin Trudeau. He's running roughshod right over it.
Right. Yeah. They just use it like they want to.
Well, they're trying to do the same forces are trying to reinterpret sex as gender identity in every sphere, including the international.
Exactly.
So.
The Yogyakarta principles and all that.
Right.
Okay, so just before you leave, I just want to say this, that I had a book that was going to be published on the whole sports thing. It was going to be, it was there already at the publishers. I asked for it back because I wanted to write a chapter on the Biden executive order. And so I just finished that chapter, and I just submitted this past week.
Oh, wow.
So the title of the book, I would show you briefly, like that's going to be the cover, but but it's not officially announced yet. So I think within the next week or two, they'll probably release it for advanced sales, like the actual cover, they'll announce it. But the title actually is called Unsporting: How Transactivism and Science Denial Are Destroying Sport.
Well, that's
it's written by Linda Blade with help of Barbara Kay. Barbara Kay is a journalist in Canada. So anyway.
Oh, that's marvelous.
That is wonderful, and hopefully if you have like a link to that or a link to pre-order, hopefully we can put that in the link in the YouTube
Can
description,
you
the
put
link
that
to
in the
that.
chat, Linda?
Yeah, you know what? It's not quite there yet. So let me
Really?
be in touch with that. I have your email addresses now, like for this meeting. So what I'll do is when it's ready to be posted for advanced sales or whatever, or even just, you know, getting the word out there, I will email you the link. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and then we need to, before we sign off, you know, we need to invite any and all of you that are interested in helping us reinvigorate the women's movement here, to consider joining Feminists in Struggle. We could use as many people in our organization as we can get. So,
and it's feministstruggle.org.
yes, and you can find us at feministstruggle.org.
And then also the Coalition for the Feminist Amendments, COFA.
Right.
You can contact us at info@sexbasedrights.org.
Yes.
And we're looking for people because time is now.
And Linda, did you say where you can be followed or?
Oh, okay. I am, if you want to follow me just on I'm quite mouthy on Twitter. So it's at Coach Blade.
At Coach Blade. Okay.
Yeah. At Coach Blade. Probably that's the best place. That's where I do all my commentary. My Facebook is more of just family and friends. And I mean, I don't really do a lot of activism there. But yeah, Twitter is probably the best. Coach Blade.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so we will follow you as Feminists in Struggle, and hopefully you can follow
Appreciate it.
back.
Yeah, and I'll follow you back for sure.
Yeah, okay. I'll make a note of that.
Sure.
At Coach Blade.
Thank you.
I don't understand.
Okay, very good.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate that you care so much about this struggle, really.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your great presentation today.
Okay, well, thank you for everything. Yeah. Oh, well, I salute all of the ladies. I know you're all doing what you can, and let's just keep doing that. Talk to your politicians.
Yeah.
You know, just work at all levels.
Yes, and we have some actions that we posted on our website. I'm going to also create a page specifically for that, so you can look there and you know, for some ideas, as well as you know, some other organizations like Wolf and WHRC have actions you can take.
Are you combining with Wolf and all these other groups?
They aren't.
Well, I think everybody's coming to that rally on March 8th.
Yay, do the rally.
Yeah, whoever can go to that would be wonderful, you know, because we need to get as many women there as possible. We're going to send a little contingent.
Great. Well, if it wasn't for COVID, I'd probably go myself, even though I'd fly from Canada, but it'd be worth buying a ticket.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And Eleanor, speaking of that, are you going to go to that?
I don't know yet. It's on a Monday, so I would have to skip classes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God, a student.
All right. Okay. Well, you want to close this out then, Eleanor?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Anne and Linda, for your presentations. Thank you, Carol, for running the Zoom session. And thanks to all of our attendees. Follow up after the event. Check in the YouTube description for all the links we talked about. And have a great evening.
Yeah.
Evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Evening on the
Bye.
East Coast.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.